Emotions and managing emotions. So, we shall be discussing about four significant theories that describe the process of how we experience, we identify various emotions that we go through, that we pass through in our daily life during certain critical situations in life. It's every day is a roller coaster. It brings along a variety of emotions. We pass through happiness, we pass through sadness, we pass through anxiety, we pass through anger, we pass through fear. So, those being a variety of continuum of emotions that we pass through, this discussion is meant to explain as to how we arrive at identifying the quality of emotion, the variety of emotion that we are going through. What is the process that precedes the identification of emotion? So primarily, there are these four theories, and to end with, we shall be discussing a most celebrated model framework in managing emotions with the help of this practice called emotional intelligence. We shall take a deeper dive into each of these uh, when we discuss the topic. Okay, so that takes us into the first theory on emotions, understanding emotions, which is by James and Lange, James and Lange theory, which suggests that it is the physiological changes in us that make us aware of the psychological experience, and hence that leads us to conclude that it is this kind of emotion that we are going through. As you can see, suppose say it explains with the help of an example. You see here, suppose you're walking in the woods, in the jungle, and you come across a bear. Okay, so what follows the confrontation with the bear immediately? It is followed by, James and Lange claim that it is followed by your hands are shivering, your legs are trembling, you are there are so these can be counted as your heart might begin to race. So these are some of the physiological changes which immediately follow the event. Event here is confronting the bear, and then immediately followed by trembling of legs, shivering of hands, and racing of the heart. And then you arrive at certain clarity that you are in a state of fear, right? So James and Lange theory proposes that you will interpret your physical reactions and conclude that you are in certain state of emotion. In this case, it is fear, or conclusion that you are frightened, right? James and Lange theory proposes that you will interpret your physical reactions, based on which you conclude the variety of emotion that you are in. I am trembling, therefore I am afraid, right? So according to him, physiological changes or physiological arousal, which is here in this case trembling and racing of heart, causes the experience of emotion. That was the theory stated by James and Lange. Okay, so as you see, there is a pictorial depiction here. So that's the sequence of steps that lead to realization of emotion. It starts with the event, followed by physiological response. Physiological response means sweating, trembling, racing, all the bodily response to the event, based on which you are interpreting what is the nature of the change, based on which you conclude the whether it is a happy emotion, whether it is sadness, whether it is fear, whether it is anger, or so on and so forth. Bodily changes follow the perception of exciting fact. Okay, bodily stages following the perception, the latter would be purely cognitive. So without the bodily change, just as James and Lange claim that if there were no bodily change, there would not have been a basis to conclude as to what kind of emotion you are going through. So he says it is basically the physiologic response that helps us in identifying the quality of emotion, the variety of emotion, type of emotion that we are going through. Okay, so that was briefly about James and Lange theory of emotion. That takes us to the next theory, which is in contradiction to James and Lange theory. Cannon and Board, they say no, it is not a sequential step, but the components remain same. They are also suggesting physiological response and emotion, but Cannon and Bard suggest that it is rather more of a simultaneous response rather than a sequential stepwise response, right? Various emotion. So they say they demonstrated with the help of a an event, a hypothetical event here, say a student going to the stage to give a lecture. And what is happening while he is going, there is a brief description about his state of mind. He is looking at the audience. In his sight, there is audience who he is nervous about, and there is his professor who is evaluating him. So both these conditions, both these sites, both these situations are causing the student to experience a racing heart, a dry mouth, and other signs of physiological arousal. At the same time, it is resulting in subjective feelings which he labels as fear or nervousness, right? So Cannon Bard suggests that there could be situations also wherein there is no great amount of time between the physiological response and identification of the emotion. As soon as there is event and there is sight of event, it is quite possible that the subject is experiencing a simultaneous response of physiological developments and emotional arousal. So that is how would Cannon-Bard theory differ from James Lange's? They have the same components, but the sequencing is where they differ. They don't agree with each other. While James and Lange put it in a sequential, stepwise manner: event, physiological response, interpretation of that, and then realization of emotion. Cannon and Bard suggest that we usually don't take so much of time. It's a simultaneous process where you experience a physiological response and emotional response at the same time. So that is one regard in which Cannon-Bard theory is differing from James and Lange. Okay, so that takes us to the third theory, which brings in another component, Schachter and Singer, which is also popularly called as a two-factor theory. Now, what is happening here? What are the two factors? So event and emotion are same in all the four theories that we discuss. It starts with the event and it ends with the realization of emotion. And there is physiological response in this theory also, but instead of calling it interpretation, Schachter and Singer would want to call it identifying the reason based on what? Based on the context or the environment. Based on the context, it could be the same physiological response. It could be similar, but then identifying the context and the environment could be different. So, for instance, look at the example that Schachter and Singer would suggest to explain their stand. They say, I am tense. Example 1, look at on the screen. I am tense and sweating. A gun is being pointed at me, which means I am afraid. Same event, I am tense and sweating. It is I am tense and sweating. The bodily response is same. Physiological response is same in both the cases. I am tense and sweating. Why are you tense and sweating? Because there is a gun being pointed at me, which is the context, which is the environment. What kind of environment are you in is what is suggesting you that you are in a state of fear, right? Likewise, if you look at example 2, I am tense and sweating. Same, I am tense and sweating as in example 2. But why are you tense and sweating here? Rita is looking at me and smiling, which means probably I am in love. Right? So the point that Skakter and Singer would like to drive home is there could be a similar physiological response, but what should be taken into cognizance, what should be taken into consideration is what is putting you in that what environment, what context, and which event is putting you in a similar response, and hence the events, the emotions will vary in accordance with the context of the physiological response. So that's how Skakter and Singer explain their theory with the help of two factors. What are the two factors here? One, your behavior, your physiological response. Two, the environment in which you are demonstrating that response, right? So based on which you arrive at a clear conclusion whether the emotion is fear or happiness or anxiety or sadness, so on and so forth. So that was about Skakter and Singer. So that takes us to the last theory on the discussion, Lazarus cognitive theory. So as the name suggests, there is a component of cognitive appraisal that Lazarus is. He says, no, it is not just about identifying. How would you interpret? How would you identify? It is more about the brain's work. It is not just, you can't call it just as a, as we call in this case. It's not just how would you identify? So Lazarus gave a further explanation that the identifying process invariably, inevitably involves the cognitive processes from the brain of the subject, right? So there is a cognitive mediation, there is an element of thinking, there is an element of reasoning. You need to appraise the event. You have an event and you are appraising the event, and then you are releasing probably both the emotion and physiological response. So if you look at it, Lazarus theory is in some way similar to Cannon-Bart's theory more than the other two, right? So Cannon-Bart theory suggests simultaneous. Lazarus also suggests simultaneous, but Lazarus has just inserted another process between the simultaneous delivery of emotion and physiological response in the name of cognitive appraisal. Stimulus a stimulus appraised as it is mentioned here, a situation which is appraised as non-threatening leads to positive emotional state. Stimulus which is appraised as threatening, which will induce the negative emotions like fear or anger. So appraising the situation is very important according to the cognitive theory or cognitive mediational theory by Lazarus. So if we take a quick look at the summary of what James and Lange, Cannon-Bart, Skakter, Singer, and Lazarus theory had suggested, look at the theory names and the components that each of these theory. That table gives a very clear and quick gist of their theory. So if you look at the components in James and Lange theory, you have an event followed by physiological response, followed by interpretation, followed by interpretation of the physiological response, followed by emotion, right? Whereas in case of Cannon and Bart theory, event which is immediately followed by a simultaneous physiological response and emotional arousal. Third theory is Skakter and Singer's two-factor theory. It suggests that event is immediately followed by physiological response, which should be interpreted based on the environment or the context in which the event has taken place, resulting in a clear conclusion about the emotion that one is passing through. Lazarus suggests that event is followed by a very clear, invariable thinking, reasoning, appraising, cognitive appraisal, resulting in simultaneous physiological and emotional arousal, resulting in the identification of the emotion. So that's how the four theories can be summarized and be understood. That's about emotions, the theories of emotions. And that takes us to managing emotions with the help of this concept called emotional intelligence, which was this was a framework suggested by one of the celebrated theorists on emotional intelligence called Daniel Goleman. You can see a matrix like diagram here, wherein your x-axis is split into self and others, and y-axis is split into recognizing and regulating, right? So he theorizes his entire thesis on emotional intelligence as this matrix, 2 by 2 matrix. If you look at the top quadrant, left top quadrant, uh, you can identify it as self recognizing, that is getting aware of oneself, getting more and more aware of oneself emotionally, whether you are able to understand, whether you are able to identify the emotions that you are going through, emotional self-assessment, accurate self-assessment, and self-confidence. So it's all about self, understanding self, evaluating self, is about self-awareness. And if you come down, now that you have understood yourself in self-awareness emotionally, with your esteem levels, your assessment levels, your capability levels, your confidence levels, you've understood. Now with all that understanding of yourself, you now in the left bottom quadrant, you are regulating yourself. Self and regulation, which is managing yourself, right? How do you manage yourself? Self control, controlling your emotions, using your emotions to benefit rather than getting out of control. Or trustworthiness, building your own trustworthiness among the people around you. It could be your classmates, it could be your colleagues, it could be your parents or siblings, friends, acquaintances. How trustworthy you are considered as among your the people around you. Conscientiousness is in terms of how strong is your conscience. That is your moral worth, your morality. How strong is your moral stand, your obedience levels, your orderliness. Likewise, adaptability, how quick you are in terms of adapting to the new conditions, right? You are in certain section of your academic session. In the next semester, maybe you'll all be uh, you put in various sections, different sections, you'll have different friends. How quick are you in adapting to the new conditions, new ecosystem, new people, new courses is a measure of adaptability. Likewise, achievement drive. How strong is your achievement drive? How good are you? How effective are you in identifying goals for yourself? And how serious are you in pursuing those goals? Following up with those goals, monitoring your progress on those goals, and how certain are you in achieving those goals, and how successful have you been in achieving your previous goals, right? That suggests your achievement drive or achievement orientation. And how good are you at taking the initiative rather than following others? How good are you at taking the initiative or volunteering for so these are some of the higher order qualities of people who are self-managed, who don't look out for being called upon and entrusted with tasks, but they are managed by themselves, they are driven by themselves, they don't need an external factor to drive them, right? Okay, so that was all about self, being aware of self and managing oneself. Second one is how strong is your social competence. Social competence, that is others. If you look at the right top corner quadrant, awareness about others, your awareness about people around you, recognizing others, self, other recognizing, which is about your social awareness. What is your level? How would you understand people? Only when you try to understand. When will you show interest in understanding people? Only when you are empathetic, your empathy levels. That is, are you interested firstly in understanding the people's situation, people's state of mind, people's state of emotion? Do you recognize their emotions? Do you connect with them? Is about your social awareness, right? Service orientation. How strong is your service orientation? Are you there when there is a help required by your friend? How often have you helped your friend? How many in the last 6 months? How many have approached you? Or how often is it that your friends recall, get reminded of you when they are in need of help? That's a quick check to see, or in the last 6 months or 1 year, how often, how frequently, or how many times have you jumped into an action when you are a friend of yours or an acquaintance of yours was in need of help? Service orientation. Organizational awareness. How aware are you of the ecosystem around you? It could be classroom, it could be an organization, it could be your home, it could be your neighborhood, whichever space, whichever ecosystem you belong to. How aware are you? How acquainted are you? Is a measure of your social awareness. And if you come down there, the right bottom quadrant, where you are managing others with the help of the social awareness that you measured above, relationship management, that is developing others. That's an extremely high order quality. How often do you help your friends in understanding things, in explaining things, in improving them, in developing them? How often do you influence your friends? Do your friends look up to you when they are in need of understanding something, improving themselves, developing themselves, need of help, right? Communicating. How effective are you in communicating? How often do you reach out to people in terms of offering the help that you can offer to them? Conflict management. How good are you in resolving conflicts? What is your general choice of words, your state of emotions? How capable are you in maintaining your state of balance of emotions, composure, adaptability, and dealing with a conflict prone situation in a very amicable, in a very balanced, in a very amiable manner, right? So these are in fact the reflection of your leadership qualities, your capability as a change catalyst, right? Uh, that is, while dealing with a change, while dealing with a new project, new assignment, or a new team. So these are all the occasion, the events of change, and how effectively, how amicably, how in a very balanced state do you deal with situations is what we mean by change catalyst. Building bonds. How effective are you in networking with people, building acquaintances, building bonds, teamwork, and collaboration, partnering with people, tying up with people, collaborating with people on projects, on tasks, assignments. So these are the various components of managing emotions with the help of the concept called emotional intelligence, through those four quadrants of this matrix split between self and other on x-axis, and recognizing and regulating on y-axis, resulting in self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So that was about the concept of emotional intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and that was the lecture on emotions and managing emotions. We'll be back with another topic shortly. Until then, see you all.